In my previous 3 sections, I've discussed the high-stakes testing, assessment policies, and a case study with artifacts. Now I'm going to talk about my stance on assessment after researching for this compendium. I have come to the conclusion that my stance on assessment is that individuality in learning assessment is the most important thing. I know that in my teaching practice, students' learning and my own professional learning, I want to keep going back to individual assessment for students that fits them instead of a one-size-fits-all agenda. In my first part of my compendium, high-stakes testing, it is proven that standardized testing puts too much pressure on kids in the classroom, just like Jessica Kidd in her article states. It also puts too much pressure on the teachers as well. The teachers are trying to push performance in NAPLAN results, and therefore they leave some individuals behind. This is also being pushed in a higher level through the competitive nature of the PISA test, where the government is jumping down the teacher's throat to push for quick fixes so that they can bounce up the ranks of international fame in education. This competitiveness further enforces the majority rather than the individual and limits creativity and forward thinking in the classroom. As Diane Ravitch in her blog states, I prefer to have creative, can-do spirit of the American people on its character, persistence, ambition, hard work, and big dreams. It's not that every child should not do the test, but perhaps the test can cater for the individual child or be done in a different way to suit the child. For example, a more practical approach or a more auditory approach to suit their learning style. In the second part of my compendium was a comparison between assessment policies, which emphasize prior knowledge testing, constant assessment, criteria to judge assessment before they are given to students, and lots of different assessment tools, including promoting feedback to students using self and peer assessment in classrooms. This in itself is helping individual students with their own learning. In my opinion, the use of all these things means a more positive classroom environment than one that is overrun with formal tests that just teach the middle with no help to the upper or lower rungs. I myself applaud the PYP or Primary Years Program approach, who, like I, do echo that individual learning styles need to come into the equation when teaching. Students need to be catered for, or at least have the option of various assessment tools and measures. Like Greg Thompson states, if we create a mark-driven classroom, we are likely to turn students into numbers instead of individuals. In the case study section of my compendium, exploring the assessment culture of the school uses lots of different assessment tools to help students. For example, in Artifact 2, the Words Their Way spelling test is a diagnostic assessment tool to help students who are struggling and challenge students who are achieving. By grouping the students, they have more of a chance at individual learning goals being achieved rather than one-size-fits-all spelling class. Another example of the individual concept of assessment that I thought was great was in Artifact 6, where the individuals are constantly being asked to reflect upon their learning in this summative assessment. Lastly, using different assessment tool rather than a normal post-test, like a think board in Artifact 6, caters to individuals who don't like test situations. In reflection, I can see that my stance on assessment has been influenced in this research for this compendium. I have become more aware about how much assessment means in a teaching situation, especially with the 8 SUL standards, in which assessment is a whole standard with 5 substandards underneath. I know that myself as a pre-service teacher will work hard to become a teacher that will try my best to cater for all the individuals in the classrooms in my assessment so that they can all have a chance to succeed.